Chapter 6, Taboos Against Excitement. The history of modern psychology is the history of this century's cultural taboos against excitement. Understanding how we, as a society, arrived at our current psychological understanding is useful for any individual in the process of reclaiming his or her identity as the being in which the light came on. History serves us best if it helps us to debunk our belief in ourselves and our taboos. Psychoanalytic theory emerged in Europe and America at the turn of the century in response to the social phenomenon of Victorian morality, which was dominant in those parts of the world at the time. According to Sigmund Freud, the primary psychological problems of Western persons in his day were the result of sexual repression, that is, people being taught to deny that they had feelings in their genitals. Consequently, his theory concerned sexuality and its repression and expression. Freud sought to cure, in individual cases, the cultural sickness of guilt about being sexual. In the years since then, we haven't solved our sexual problems, but the intensity with which we have to deny our sexual nature has definitely decreased. Sex is not such a shame anymore. There are still, however, all kinds of controls we are supposed to put on our sexual excitement, to pretend that it's not there or to avoid getting too excited. A major social concern is how to be assured of control over other people's excitement. We make deals with other people not to let our excitement get out of hand if they will not let theirs get out of hand. We don't want to embarrass each other. The problem with denying sexual energy is that, sooner or later, somehow or other, it has to be dealt with. Repression doesn't really make things go away. The feelings and excitement that are so bothersome to us resurface in other areas of our lives. For instance, a person who has put a lot of energy into denying his own sexuality and making sexual behavior an evil thing may become a self-appointed defender of the public morals and will make it his civic duty to screen pornographic movies and books in a tireless effort to protect the young people of this country from filth. This may be the only way he can deal with his own sexual feelings without violating what his mind believes is acceptable behavior. Most of us, however, don't go to this extreme. We suppress our sexuality with guilt, moralism, and compensating forms of excitement like overeating, overworking, smoking cigarettes, taking drugs, drinking, and so on. We keep ourselves busy thinking, eating, working hard, and alternately using tranquilizers and stimulants rather than staying in touch with the sensations in our bodies. After a couple of world wars in which people killed each other in large numbers, it became obvious that society had another serious sickness in addition to sexual repression, the repression of anger. Fritz Perls wrote a book called Ego, Hunger, and Aggression in the 1940s, in which he developed a theory concerning the causes and treatment of aggression. He said that people had to learn how to make aggressing a process of personal psychological growth instead of a cause. Just as the person watching pornographic movies as a censor would probably benefit from dealing with his own repressed sexual feelings instead of fighting them for the anti-smut cause, people would benefit more from dealing with anger on a personal level than they would from collectively warring on other groups of people. The warfare going on inside us, disowned, gets projected into the outside world. We make our enemies the very picture of evil, justifying our anger at the same time we avoid the immediate experience of it. Instead of an immediate argument or fight, we think hateful thoughts. Since we are frightened of our anger, we learn to think rather than act when we get angry. Most people think that this is the way to handle anger. It takes a toll, however, in terms of feeling alive and happy, and creates more anger. In order to decrease the pressure, we have to get mad out loud, but we are afraid of the experience of anger we would have to go through in order to have the anger disappear. We learn to act nice and deny that we are angry, and we make ourselves sick in the process of denial. This is one of the main areas in which something we can't tell the truth about ruins our lives. The ongoing denial process uses a lot of energy and thought. Thus, the angry feelings we try to control end up controlling us. They keep us fat as we eat to suppress them, or alienated and more alone as we act even nicer to control them. When we are willing to experience our anger and raise hell with others, our anger disappears or changes form after a period of heated exchange. When we begin to acknowledge the unacknowledged aggression and repressed anger, it no longer runs our lives. Usually, a few other unacknowledged emotions show up too. In fact, there are always other feelings underneath the anger. Grief may show up next. As it turns out, there is usually a fund of unacknowledged joy buried under the unacknowledged anger and grief. The joy is buried deep, so deep, and was repressed so long ago that most people never even suspect that it exists inside of them. I believe joy is the most primitively repressed emotion, and the one closest to the original source of experience of unity in the womb and early life. Children have the freedom to express joy openly. Adults repress joy. It is a way of protecting ourselves from being hurt. Just as we fear the consequences of expressing anger or sexual feelings, we fear the consequences of giving and receiving love. God forbid we should get too happy. God forbid we should get too happy. If we let ourselves bubble over, we fear that we just might bubble away. We are afraid that if we let ourselves love freely, we'll be opening ourselves up for tremendous hurt. Joy and expressions of love are thus the primary repressed emotions and actions. We don't trust happiness. We preserve the superstition that if we get too happy, we're in for a downfall. We might fall back into heaven and lose track of ourselves altogether. Neurosis. Neurosis is essentially a refusal to accept what is happening in the present. Neurosis involves denying the truth about any form of excitement here and now. A neurotic is a person who incessantly demands that life be other than it is, a person refusing to accept what is being experienced in any given moment is being neurotic at that moment. Being neurotic occasionally doesn't qualify one for diagnosis as a neurotic. A person who steals once is only a person who stole something one time. A person who steals over and over is a thief. To the extent that we all occasionally avoid experience, we all occasionally indulge in neurotic behavior. Whether we earn the label neurotic depends only on the frequency, persistence, and intensity with which we deny feelings, sensations, or any experience whatsoever. A person who refuses to acknowledge experience over and over is a neurotic. Thus, neurosis is a name for consistently denying sexuality, aggression, joy, grief, love, and other feelings. The key to the cure for neurosis is not only the identification of the feelings being denied, but the person's acknowledgement of those feelings. Usually, more than one emotion is being denied. For example, when a troubled adolescent breaks down and cries after expressing anger at his father because some event has blown his tough independence act, he may express authentic anger, authentic grief, authentic love. The truth about what feelings are there cures neurosis. We get lost in our minds and lose touch with our experience when we begin to feel something that we are afraid is too much for us to feel, or something we think we are not supposed to feel. We are all afraid of having our excitement run away with us, of losing control. When we try to avoid fully experiencing the dreaded sensation or emotion, we get trapped in the frenetic babbling of our minds. Have you ever noticed that after you have had an uncomfortable encounter with someone in which you didn't fully express how you felt at the time, your mind talks to you incessantly? It keeps reviewing the conversation, trying to insert things you wish you had said. Our minds get energy to babble on like this from our fear of experiencing dreaded emotions. and they work overtime to keep our attention away from what we're afraid to feel. Recapturing control of your own attention is thus the first step to overcoming neurosis. Refocusing our awareness. A human being can only be aware of 3 things. 1, things happening in the immediate environment. 2, feeling and sensations inside the body. And 3, thoughts and fantasies. Most of us spend most of our time paying attention to the 3rd category, the mind stream, and we have lost touch with what is actually happening inside our skin and right in front of us. We fall into the habit of giving all of our attention to thoughts, beliefs, and fantasy, and thus we lose touch with the basis of all fantasy, experience. Good therapy helps people who are trapped in the mind stream or in their thoughts about experience. It helps them get back to paying attention to what's going on here and now. Refocusing on experience helps the person in denial to feel what is going on inside him and begin to tell the truth to cure himself. He may learn that the source of his bodily sensations are his beliefs and fears based on earlier incomplete and unpleasant experiences, where he made a moral resolve never to let anything like that happen again. People stay scared and thought-ridden until they get some support from other people who have been through the experience of lightening up and letting go of protective beliefs and taboos. Once a person comes to his senses, he can learn to rely less and less on his mind's ideas and beliefs and really know from moment to moment how he feels. Again, as Fritz Perls puts it, the objective is to lose your mind and come to your senses. When a therapist can help a person to tolerate living in a wider experience of life in any given moment, the way that person relates to his whole life is transformed. The transformation from living in the narrow jail of belief to living in the wide world of experience is at first terrifying, but, as those who have hung in there can tell you, it's well worth the trouble. Applied psychology. What follows are conversations recalled from a few sessions with a client. The interaction demonstrates the way refocusing on experience, rather than the conversation of the mind, is both frightening and intensely worthwhile. Stephanie started therapy because she wanted to lose weight. She was 23, had a receptionist job she disliked, and wanted to lose 30 pounds. She was shy and mildly depressed, and particularly unhappy about being fat. She was also very pretty and, overweight or not, had a voluptuous figure. In fact, I imagined her being overweight had a lot to do with her attractiveness. During our first conversation, I said, "I think you're pretty, and overweight or not, your figure is still very sexy." She blushed and said, "Thank you." I said, "I imagine that men hit on you and come on to you all the time." She nodded and smiled. Then the following dialogue ensued. Me: "How do you feel about that?" Stephanie: "Well, at first I'm flattered, I guess, but really I don't like it too much. When the men at the office make little wisecracks, I don't say anything, but I don't like it." There was silence for a while. Me: "I imagine when you start to lose weight, your figure is going to be even more noticeable than it is now. You're going to have more of that to deal with. You'll have to create some other way of handling men hitting on you besides getting fat again." Stephanie: "Yes, I know what you're talking about. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I've quit diets before for that very reason." Me: "Well, what about right now? I'm attracted to you, and I'm telling you. Are you embarrassed?" Stephanie: "Yes, a little. Although it isn't as bad as at work." Me: "Are you attracted to me?" "A little bit," she said, and looked down and blushed. "I notice that you're looking down and turning red." We both laughed. "Sure is a shame we're attracted to each other, isn't it?" And we laughed again. She said, "I don't really think it's shameful, but I do feel embarrassed. I talk to my girlfriend Shelley about this all the time. I think it's funny, and I also feel kind of sad in a way. I don't know why." I appreciate you for being willing to talk to me about this. I want to talk to you about attraction and embarrassment and sadness. I also want you to know that we can talk about these things without having to make a pass at each other. I'm married. I won't come on to you, and you don't have to worry about that with me. But I like your smile, and I like your willingness to talk with me about this. I'm happy when you say you're attracted to me. We both laughed again. I like this too. I never would have brought this up with anyone else, but I'm glad that we're talking about it. Usually I would wait and tell Shelley later that I thought you were cute and liked me. Actually, I'm kind of relieved that you're married. We laughed again. Laughter is the sound of freedom. We liked each other. I noticed something else about you. Go ahead, this is interesting, Stephanie prompted me. I noticed that you are very quick to smile even when you talk about being angry or you're embarrassed. I imagine everybody thinks of you as a nice girl. Stephanie laughed. Yeah, I guess so. All the women at the office call me dear. They think I'm sweet. Aren't you? No, it's an act. We both laughed again. She continued. Shelley and I talk about this too. I think I have to be nice all the time, or that it isn't right to get angry. I get mad, but I don't show it. A lot of people eat when that happens. Oh, I do that all the time, and so does everyone else in my office. We both laughed again. Later, when you start eating less and working out more, you might feel more anger. You won't be handling your anger by eating like you used to. You will get a chance to experience the feelings you've been dampening down with food. Sometimes it's not much fun. You either have to figure out some other way of dealing with those feelings, or you won't be successful with weight loss or depression for long. She paused. Okay. Sounds like more trouble than I thought. It probably is, but it's not all bad news. You'll probably feel okay most of the time. We will make some agreements about exercise and diet. I will teach you self-hypnosis and ask you to practice it on your own. We will do some work with you telling me about who you get mad at and when. I'll be asking you to do things like go have a conversation with people you've been hiding things from, like your parents or friends. There will be times when you may feel like quitting. You may hit a plateau where you won't lose any weight for a while, even though you're being good. You may get depressed or angry or tired. You may not feel any of those things. If you are willing to let those feelings come up and experiment with them without quitting, you have a chance at staying thin for a year, which will give you good odds for staying relatively thin permanently. I am not sure you should do this, though. Being mildly depressed and overweight has worked pretty well for you. I'm not sure you ought to give it up. Ha! I do know what you mean, though. But I'm tired of it all. I'm ready to figure out another way. Later on, we talked a little more. She told me how it was a hassle for her to be living at home, and that while work was okay, she sometimes got headaches there and generally felt tired after she got home. She also volunteered that she had been uncomfortable about her figure for some time. She said she developed very early in adolescence and remembered feeling embarrassed when men would pay attention to her while she was with her father. Her father felt uncomfortable about her voluptuous figure as well and would say, "Stephanie, wear clothes that aren't so revealing." She had been hiding her body under bulky sweaters and blazers since she was 10 years old. I believe her willingness to share these personal feelings with me grew out of the context created by my willingness to tell her what I was feeling and thinking about her, and my asking her to do the same.